Wadcutters for defense ballistic test with Dan the Wolfman. He sent over some of this ammunition to test and a ballistic test to see what we get here. So what I got here is some Precision 1 Wadcutter ammunition, 148 grain, and it is a plated wadcutter, a copper plated wadcutter. And I also have some traditional style 148 grain cellular and billet lead wadcutters. So what we want to see is how this stuff will perform if there's really a difference between the copper plated wadcutter and the old traditional style wadcutter. So I'm going to use my snub nose revolver for this test, just because you're not going to get a whole much more velocity in a longer barrel. And you know, a lot of people looking for ammunition like this to use are going to be looking at using it in a smaller, shorter barrel revolver, because if you had the extra weight of a longer barrel, you're not going to pick this usually, but it would be very, very low recoil in a larger revolver. So what we're going to do for this test is we're going to do our plain clear ballistic test. I do have the chronograph set up in front of the gel block. I usually don't do that because if I start having errors that day, I'm not going to get any reads, but hopefully I can get some reads. But we're going to go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. And then after that, I'm going to do more of our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard. We'll see how they compare in more of our real world simulation. And then I was discussing this with Dan the Wolfman. He kind of wanted to see, you know, how these would do going through a little bit of a hard barrier, if that copper plating would hold up better than a plain wadcutter. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put some auto glass up here on this first piece here, right here. Got a nice piece of auto glass that I'm also going to test after doing my normal testing to see if there's a difference between the copper plating and the regular wadcutter. But that also got me thinking, you know, in the 3rd installment of the Dirty Harry series, Dirty Harry says, you know, the other cop asks him, why do you use that big 44? And his response was, 357 is a good weapon, but I've seen 38s careen off windshields. No good in a city like this. And then she comes back and says, so it's for the penetration. So that got me thinking, why don't I just fire a shot of 44 Magnum through the auto glass and just kind of see how that compares, see if there really is a big difference there, see if Dirty Harry was correct. So what I have here is Buffalo Bore lower recoil 44 Magnum. That's what it's listed as. It's actually very much a full power load. I wrote on the back here what I got through this revolver, my 4-inch Smith & Wesson 69 in the past. 1260 feet per second, 846 foot-pounds energy. That's actually more power than a typical 44 Magnum through that, even though it's listed as lower recoil. And then if I have some rounds left, I'll pop some off at the steel target just to kind of see if there's a difference in accuracy with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, so I'm back far enough from the gel block to hopefully get a read with these. If not, these things are, both of them are rated right there at about 700 feet per second. Generally, I get somewhere around 650 feet per second with stuff like this. So first up, we're going to do our lead wadcutter. And then after that, we're going to do our copper plated wadcutter and our plain gel test. So first up, we have our straight lead wadcutter, plain clear ballistics. Let's see what we get with this. $560 feet per second. Wow. Copper plated. Let's see what this does. 669. So that cellular and billet is very much underpowered. That copper plated one has a little more juice behind it. Let's go take a look. All right, so we had a lot of penetration with the copper one and it bounced back a little bit, and we had a little bit less penetration with the lead one. That being said, the lead one is fine, fine for penetration. Our first 3-inch piece here, you know, the top shot with the copper plate, it does show a little bit more energy dump going on. But what we got going on here with our straight lead wadcutter is we have a penetration of about 15 3/4 inches of penetration. That's totally fine. But with our copper plated one, we had a lot of bounce back. Our actual track went to about 21 inches, and then the bullet bounced back to about 18 1/4 inches. So interesting that it would do that like that. The only thing I can think is that there was so little mushrooming of that it bounced back. Interesting. So let's put on our denim, put in our MDF, see how they compare in more of our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim. I know it's redundant, but I like to keep that consistent. 3 inches of clear ballistics, 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hidden ribs or sternum. Let's see how we do here with our lead Wadcutter. No read on that. Let's go with our copper plated. 671 feet per second, so a very consistent velocity with our copper plated. Let's go take a look at that. All right, so this is something that I see quite a bit. Whenever we're talking like 32s and low end 38s and 380s, this is something that happens quite a bit. Is we start to we really lose the ability to get good penetration when especially when we put it in this rib simulation. And what we can see here is some very big differences here. On the bottom with our Wadcutter, we can see that started to tumble before it hit this. And with the top shot with our copper plated, it did not tumble. And there also could be some deformation going on with that, which severely lowered its penetration. So with our lead Wadcutter, we only got 11 1/4 inches of penetration. Now with our top shot here, I can actually see denim, a plug of denim in that thing that pushed forward, but we went right to 17 inches, really ideal penetration in my mind here. So what I'm seeing here is, even though the lead one is kind of okay, we almost got to 12 inches and we got more than that in plain gel. I don't like to see tumbling with stuff like this, because that's going to indicate, you know, erratic performance. You're not going to know exactly what performance you're going to get in different situations, different angles, you know, with different angle shots you might have to make. And I'm just not comfortable with that changing so much. As where with our copper plated, I like that, you know what you're going to get. It's going to punch a straight clean hole no matter what, is what I can tell here. So let's put in some new MDF, put up that piece of windshield, and see how these compare with our hard barrier test. All right, so I backed up a little bit because I don't really want a bunch of glass spalling on me, and I also don't want to have that going in my chronograph sensor. So I took my chronograph down, but I was able to get that glass at a pretty good angle for, you know, simulating an actual angle of glass. I know in the past I got a lot of flack for not doing that, because I didn't do it because it's very difficult to do that. To take a whole piece of glass and just put it where you want it, you got to have it leaning against something. But with this little bit smaller piece, I was able to get it like that. So we're gonna hit that with our straight lead Wadcutter and see what happens. So 38 special snub nose, cellular and bellet lead Wadcutter. Ooh, a lot of impact on that glass. Let's go take a look at that before I move on. All right, so our lead Wadcutter is stuck about 1.5 inches in this first 3 inches. So there was a definite effect on that. So let me move, I did not put up the denim because that's kind of hard to do, but let me move the MDF a little bit over so I can hit a fresh piece of glass with our copper plate and see how that does. All right, so I'm gonna hit the glass a little bit over to the right where I didn't actually put a hole through it. It's cracked, but it's still gonna provide pretty much the same resistance. So copper plated, let's see what this does. Let's go take a look. All right, with that, I saw immediately that we did not have so much spalling, and it just punched right through. So let's pull this out, even though we didn't hit that with the lead wad cutter. I did clip the edge of that. And honestly, for what we're working with, that's not bad. This is actually pretty much what 9mm does. We got a total penetration to about 10.5 inches. Parallax will make it look like it's maybe a little bit further up than that. You know, if I put myself up to where the center of that camera is, you might think it's like 11.5, but yeah, 10.5 inches. Honestly, not bad for what it is. That's comparable to a 9mm. So now let's see if Dirty Harry was right. Let's hit that with the 44 Magnum. Let's see what that does. All right, so I have that moved over to a piece of glass without any holes there. 44 Magnum. Let's see how right Dirty Harry was. Let's go take a look. Well, Dirty Harry was right. You definitely get penetration through auto glass with 44 Magnum. And what's really funny about this is if you were to take like a 357 Magnum 158 grain and you were to do this test without the auto glass, you would get pretty much the same penetration that we got with the 44 Magnum through auto glass. That is funny because that means Dirty Harry, he knew what he was talking about. At least Clint Eastwood did, or whoever wrote that movie knew exactly what he was talking about. We got a penetration through auto glass with 44 Magnum of about 21.25 inches. Now without the auto glass, typically 44 Magnum's up here around 26-27 inch mark, but it became very comparable to a 357 Magnum. Again, I hit on the side and I chipped off a piece of that MDF, but that is very impressive to kind of see that. But that was just for fun. So let's pull these bullets out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these little wad cutters here. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets here. Here's our standard plain gel shots here with both of these. Here's our cellular and billet wad cutter. There's not really a whole lot going on with that. Here is our Precision 1 plated wad cutter. Essentially no deformation there. Plain gel shots here. Now going through our denim and our MDF, our real world simulation, we can see with our cellular and billet, there is just a little bit of deformation going on there. A little imprinting of that denim. Relatively soft bullet here. With our Precision 1, I don't see any difference at all between this one and the one through the plain gel. Now there might be a little bit of deformation there, like changing in diameter at that nose, but for the most part there's really not a lot going on. Now the biggest thing here that really changed everything here was through our auto glass. Huge difference here. Here is our cellular and billet wad cutter. It just deformed it into nothing, so we can see why it didn't penetrate very far. That was way too soft to do anything with a barrier. As where our Precision 1, I mean, honestly, this is deforming the way a straight up jacket deforms. Like when I tested HST and Gold Dot and stuff like that, like even the HST would kind of do this. But this is, you know, very similar to a Gold Dot as well. So I would say their plating is on par with Gold Dot. It's a pretty high quality plating. So a huge difference there. You know, very acceptable. I would not use that at all. Now, just for fun, we did the 44 Magnum. Got some jacket separation, but that kind of doesn't matter because the jacket actually went as deep as the lead core. So it kind of doesn't matter that it separated. A lot of mass there, a lot of damage. Interesting. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 12 yards from the target, I got some cellular and billets here in the revolver, and I got some of these Precision 1 plated wad cutters on my speed loader. Kind of challenging to load wad cutters with a speed loader, but let's see what I can do here with our cellular and billet lead ones here. 12 yards. Very, very low recoil. Now we'll try our plated Wadcutters. Let's see what these things will do. Alright, so even though there is a little more recoil, it's still in the vicinity of a Wadcutter recoil, which is roughly about the recoil, just a tad less than like 158 grain lead round nose target ammo. So with this, you're actually getting a lot for the recoil. You're getting a lot of performance for how low that recoil is. So let me back up. I got a couple rounds of these each left, and let me back up and shoot the steel, see how they compare. All right, 40 yards from the target. It took me a minute to find my marker under the snow there, but let's see what I can get here from 40 yards. Here's our cellular and bellet Wadcutters. All right, so here's our precision ones. All right, so I think the power level of those is causing them to shift and probably shoot over the target, because, you know, when you're getting to 600s velocity, you'll see a little muzzle rise before the bullet leaves. With the cellular and bellet, they probably went up and then it came back down. Or, I mean, these came back down from this angle, as where our other ones probably were going a little too fast, so they did not drop back down. More than likely, they are over the target. Just for fun, let's see how Dirty Harry would do here. 40 yards, full power 240 grain. Oh, I would not want to be that guy, I'll tell you that much. So interesting test looking at this overall here. Really fun test, and I'm kind of glad I did this test, because I made the assumption when Dan mentioned this about the hard barrier, I kind of mentally made the assumption that, you know what, these are both going to suck bad. I thought pretty much what we would get with both of them is what we got with the straight lead Wadcutter. Because in my mind, plating is kind of like a little bit better than copper wash situation. It's not a true jacket. You know, plating is very, very thin compared to a jacket. So I'm thinking there is just no way at Wadcutter velocity that a plating is going to do anything. It's going to mushroom out. It's going to be terrible. But I was wrong. That plating made a huge difference. And what we got through penetration through the auto glass is spot on with what you would get with 9mm. So looking at this overall, I'm going to say that our lead Wadcutter, straight lead Wadcutter, was very subpar. I would not carry that for defense. As for our plated one, it did all the things that a 9mm does, except for the expansion at less recoil. So honestly, not a bad option to have that Wadcutter, because you're punching a clean hole. You're cutting things that a rounded bullet or even an unexpanded rounded bullet, you know, wouldn't do. For instance, if you had like a 380 and you had some Remington HTP jacket of hollow points, that roundedness probably would, you know, skirt around it, might not cut it, as where a Wadcutter would clip it. So there's definitely some benefits to Wadcutters. Now, a lot of people, you know, they kind of scoff at it, you know, well, we're in the 21st century, we have a lot better options now. Maybe that's true, but a lot of times those better options are not very consistent. You might get expansion, you might not get expansion. Now you got the flute ammo that people are quoting as the best ammo ever, and all the slow motion footage I've seen, it's just simply tumbling, which can be a good thing, but again, that's not a very consistent thing to rely on. As where, at least with a Wadcutter, you consistently know what's happening. It's punching a Coke can through some. That's a pretty consistent thing to rely on. So you kind of know what you're going to get. So interesting test overall. So again, thank you to Dan the Wolfman for sending this ammunition. Kind of made my day in a way. It's really kind of interesting to see. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.